What is up, you guys? Naesam here, and 7.2.5 is kind of like approaching. I wouldn't say it's super close, but within a month or two we'll be having that patch coming out, probably close to a month, if not under a month. So I think it's time that we finally start looking at some of the LA changes. I have this massive mountain of LA changes I want to talk about, but I think I may have misplaced it, so we're gonna have to work with what we have. Earth Elemental is now better than Blood Death Knights in Tomb of Sargeras, I heard. So that's pretty cool. Hits for like 15k now. Yeah, Earth Elemental. And then new Legendaries came out. And that's pretty much it. Yep. And I guess the 4 set, but I already kind of talked about that. But anyways, let's move on from the terrible jokes and actually talk about something. So let's start off with a pro tip I found out about. If you ever find yourself accidentally spec'd into Storm Elemental, keep in mind that Storm Elemental is currently simming at about a 30k DPS loss as opposed to no talent. If you ever find yourself accidentally spec'd into Storm Elemental and you're actually considering using it, here's a pro tip to make sure you don't. Go ahead and put on the new Legendary ring. Actually, no. Wrong order. I'm doing this wrong. You spec into Echo the Elements, you put on the new Legendary ring, then you take off the ring, and you'll do more DPS this way. This is the only way to actually do this, and you just leave it like this, and you can go do the fights, and you'll do about 30k more DPS than if you accidentally click on the middle one here. So that's just a little pro tip for you guys. Yeah, I said I was moving on from the jokes, and unfortunately I was being honest because that wasn't a joke. Anyways, new Legendaries. Let's look at the one we just talked about, this ring. So it looks like they actually gave this thing some more stats. Originally it had really, really low stats compared to other rings of the same eye level. It's still not great. It could definitely be a little better, but it'll do, I guess. It's not simming terribly low, it's not looking terribly bad, and honestly, in fights where you'd want to use Liquid Magma Totem, like if there's ads spawning every 1 minute or something, this could be actually really good, because then you'd have like the best of both worlds. You have the single target during the other parts, and then you have the ad burst when you wanted it. Another thing is this could also potentially be one of the best legendaries to go into your Mythic Plus set for your bosses, because you'd be using AoE legendaries and AoE talents. You'd be using Lightning or Liquid Magma Totem, and then you put this on for the boss and you'd have Echo of the Elements. And that could potentially be a really good thing. So there are some uses for this ring now. It was originally pretty bad because of the stats, but they seem to be slowly alleviating that issue until now when it has some kind of use. The other new legendary is the Smouldering Heart. It is gloves, and basically what it does is it makes your Earth Shock have a 20% chance and your Earthquake have a 10% chance to grant you Ascendance for 10 seconds. We have done some testing, and we're fairly certain that the Earth Shock 20% chance is at least 100 Maelstrom, because originally we were doing some testing and it showed that like spamming Earth Shock at 10 Maelstrom was a huge DPS increase because you'd have like really, really high Ascendance uptime. But as we tested some stuff on the PTR, we kind of discovered that at low Maelstrom it didn't seem to proc at all. Or like it did proc, but like a really, really low chance. And we're kind of still finalizing this data, but basically we're going to talk about this under the assumption that it is working as it should, and that being Maelstrom scaling, as in like the 20% chance is only at 100 plus or whatever. Even with it being at 100 plus, this is still a really, really good legendary, like potentially overly good. I play a little bit with it, and I kind of discovered that it's very, very RNG, so it's excellent for what Blizzard wants to do with LA Shaman, and I hate it with every fiber of my being, but it's just kind of what we got right now. Originally they did seem to have something else, but this is what they've decided on, and it's unlikely it's going to change, other than getting nerfed probably. But even with the RNG factor, it is sitting quite high. It's just the variance is extreme, and it would be very, very unreliable. But yeah, as I was saying, I did try some testing on it, single target. My first test, I did Ascendance build as normal single target rotation, and I got to the 3-minute mark, went into my second Ascendance, and the first proc was during my second Ascendance. That was when I was using the boots. So that was 20 Earth Shocks before the first proc, which is very low chance it actually happens, so don't take that as like how it's going to be. The second test, I had multiple procs in a row and ended up having a 55-second long Ascendance. which was just ridiculous. Like, I didn't actually have the buff up for 55 seconds. Like, I didn't have, like, the timer going for 55 seconds, but I did have the buff up for a total of 55 seconds until it finally fell off. And that's just a little absurd. And I mean, that was with boots, though, granted. And another new legendary is the Deceivers Blood Pact. I think this actually, they brought it back from 7.1, and no one's seen it since, and it seems to have made a comeback. And I'm back to making the terrible jokes, I'm sorry. But basically, the boots actually might see some use if these gloves go through as they are, because the boots do synergize it with it pretty well. I'm not going to say anything about like what's best or anything, because the data, we just don't have enough information on that yet to make any clear calls. But this definitely could have some synergy. So if you have the boots, don't be too terribly depressed like we are right now, because you might have a use for them somewhat soon. Oh, and I just want to mention that I really don't like the design of these gloves for a couple reasons. I already mentioned the RNG reason, but the other reason is that the time you're generating the most Maelstrom is going to be during area of effect abilities like Chain Lightning. I don't know why I said that so weird, but you're going to be generating a lot of Maelstrom during AoE. You proc it because you're using more Maelstrom during AoE, and then you get Ascendance, and Ascendance is kind of terrible during AoE, and Ascendance, Chain Lightning becomes Lava Beam, and that doesn't proc Lightning Rod or Lightning Rod damage. So this could actually be a very serious hindrance during AoE if you get it to proc at the wrong time, which is very unfortunate, and it seems like an oversight, but we're LA Shaman, so it'll very unlikely get fixed. So at this point I've talked for enough time about the boots. Let's actually see what they do. So we're just going to do the normal rotation. I spec wrong? I am. I'm going to go put on Echo of the Elements. I could just put on the ring, but I want to do it with the boots to get the most amount of procs as I can. I don't have the built-on to use Rocket. Dang. But we're back now, so we're just going to do our normal rotation here. Pop Hero, because why not? Earth Alien everything. Kind of pretend I'm doing a raid boss that just requires no movement, so I'm not doing a raid boss because there's none like that. PTR is being a little laggy right now. First, Earthshock did not proc it. Let's see if we can actually get a proc in like a timely manner, because I'm not going to sit here recording this for 10 minutes. Not yet. There's one. And you have like, because Earthshock is the beginning of the global, you do have a moment to react and start casting the proper spell, but you really have to be watching to make sure that you do notice when it does proc, because if you don't notice, you're going to hurt yourself a lot by missing one of the lava bursts. So really be paying attention to your Ascendance. If you have a weak aura like mine, it makes it really obvious because it suddenly lights up. That's probably just be casting Chain Lightning to get a higher chance. So it's not really proccing very much right now for me. Though it's actually, I mean, it's 20%, so it's not expected to proc a whole lot. But I do know of a way to proc it constantly if I really wanted to. Here's this, and then you Lava Beam, and it really doesn't do all that much damage, and doesn't do anything with Lightning Rod, so that's why I don't like it for AoE. I haven't gotten any consecutive procs yet. But right now, unless they fixed it in the past hour or two, since I last logged on, Earthquake, like, whoever was coding this, they said, oh, 10%, and then they accidentally put an extra 0 on because it's 100%. So, if you want to play with it on PTR, just get some Earthquakes going, and you can stack this thing up. I've gotten it up to 4 minutes before I got bored, and it's kind of fun to do. It's kind of like a 4-set where it doesn't function at all because it's going to get nerfed. Well, it's different than a 4-set because the 4-set probably won't get nerfed, at least I hope not. But a little fun to do, but don't expect it to last more than a couple days. If it does last more than a couple days, then prepare your Earthquake pants because you're going to be using that a lot. But yeah, that's the legendary gloves in a nutshell. They aren't really, not something I'm super fond of, but a lot of people do seem to enjoy it. I can see why, because it is kind of a fun concept, but I'm just so sick and tired of the AoE that I should probably just make my own video about that instead of what I'm doing right now. Oh, and also, prepare yourself to change your stats again, because who knows what we're going to end up with. Just save all your gear. The new 4-set is probably going to mix things up a little bit. But, yeah. So one other thing I wanted to mention is that when I made my video about the 4-piece, I did mention that I saw it as at 75%, and then I logged in like an hour later, and it was at 100%. And it seems that they went back on that again, and now it's 75% again. So, it's getting nerfed. I did run a bunch of sims with it before it was nerfed, but I don't really want to talk about it that much because it was nerfed, and let's just say it's looking kind of grim. It's certainly going to be worse than the tier 19 for single targets, and absolutely worse than the tier 19 for AoE, because it's literally nothing for AoE. Single targets, it was pretty close before, but we'll have to see how it goes. I don't want to be sitting here running sims every time they change it when they flip-flop on it every 2 minutes. But sometime closer to release, I'll give you guys an update on that. But for now, it's not looking good. Let's see if Storm Elemental is fixed yet. No, Storm Elemental is still 1 second. They changed the 2 set, but they haven't fixed the whole talent being a 30k DPS decrease thing. That, I can't get into this again. I'll be really sad again. So, unfortunately, I haven't been able to test any Tomb of Sargeras content, at least outside of the LFR I did and uploaded. But just looking at streams and at the fights, and at the Dungeon Journal and all that, it looks like Ellie is going to be pretty terrible on most of the fights. There are some fights that are going to be very, very good, but in general, we're going to be pretty bad. And I saw someone on the forums mention that it's a very similar situation to Hellfire Citadel, and I read that and really came to realize that I really agree with that, because Hellfire Citadel is like most bosses we were pretty bad on, but there was like the 3 that we were really good on, like Iskar, Zul'Harrak, and Manaroth we were pretty good on. Zul'Harrak we were like gods on, and then everything else that we were good on was pretty irrelevant, like Hellfire Assault. No one cared about that. And in Tomb of Sargeras, it's looking like there's going to be like 2 or 3 fights that will have potential to be very good on, and then the rest of the fights are pretty much single targets, and we're probably going to be very, very bad on. Like, I mean like bottom DPS, unless something is changed for other specs that I'm not aware of. Right now, on fights like Trilliax and stuff, we're basically down there with Shadow Priests as the worst of the worst for single targets, with any kind of movement especially. And Shadow Priests are getting a pretty nice single target, well, not just single target, but they're getting a pretty nice 4 set and 2 set. Theirs got changed, and it's looking pretty good. Who knows where it's going to go, but basically what I'm saying is that we may be lonely down there, and it's something that we should try to bring to Blizzard's attention, and I'm definitely considering making a video and like a forum post, kind of to go together, to really like organize my thoughts on this and what I think is wrong with this, because they don't seem to think anything's wrong with us being really bad at single target, and I strongly disagree with that. So I may end up doing that, but for now, just keep your feedback going to Blizzard about State of Ellie, and hopefully we won't be switching back to Shadow Priest again, like in Trials of Valor. Though this time, my Shadow Priest is far enough behind that it probably wouldn't be feasible, so I might just get sad. But yeah, let's not talk about that. Anyways, guys, there's a pretty long-winded version of my thoughts on the new Legendaries and the lack of changes and all that. Hopefully it wasn't a little too ranty, but I don't know, I'm just in that mood, you know? So, anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you want to see anything in particular, as usual, in the comments, and like if you liked it, all that other stuff. And I will see you guys next time.